So this will be fun. I'm going to open the debate. Be it resolved that Canada needs proportional representation, and we begin on the yes side with Andrew Coyne.
Well, thank you, Evan, and thank you, everyone, for turning out. Anyone who ever proposes to change anything inevitably runs up against the unanswerable objection that this would mean changing things. Nowhere is this more true than with regard to electoral reform. People who at any other time can be found seething with rage at the state of our politics turn into its most ardent defenders the minute it is proposed that something actually be done about it. Like the child in the Hilaire Belloc poem, we are inclined to always keep a hold of nurse for fear of finding something worse. Or as it is sometimes put, what is the problem that electoral reform is trying to solve? Isn't this all rather an abstract academic exercise? At some point, somebody invariably invokes that ancient bit of cornpone philosophy, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is very good advice, unless it is broke. So on the way to making the case for proportional representation, as my partner will, let me first make the case against the status quo, the system known as first past the post. What I want to suggest is that many of the frustrations we have with how our politics works or doesn't work are not inevitable, but are products of that system. That the method of voting we think of as normal is in fact highly abnormal, that indeed it violates some pretty fundamental principles of democracy. If we were trying to define democracy, what might we say were its essential features? Well, you might say it's a system in which the majority rules. But that does not describe our system, does it? Not only does it only take a plurality rather than a majority to win in each riding, but majority governments, quote unquote, are commonly formed with less than 40% of the popular vote. Forgive me, but I think this is a pretty non-trivial objection. Rule by the minority over the majority. We wouldn't put up with it, say, in Parliament. If someone were to try to pass a law with the votes of only 39% of the members of Parliament, I'd be willing to bet there'd be riots. So how is it any different if MPs representing only 39% of the people do likewise? How else might we describe democracy? Well, it's a system in which everyone gets to vote, and every vote is equal. One person, one vote. But again, that does not describe our system. It's too dry to say that the proportion of seats won by each of the parties bears no relation to their share of the popular vote. What that really means is that some votes count for a lot more than others. For example, in the last election, it took 38,000 votes to elect each Liberal MP. By contrast, it took 1.5 times as many votes to elect each Conservative, twice as many to elect each New Democrat or Bloc Québécois MP, and of course the 600,000 plus Green voters were rewarded with exactly one seat. Or consider the 1993 election. The Conservatives, you'll recall, with 16% of the vote, were reduced to a humiliating 2 seats. Meanwhile, the Bloc surged to 54 seats on the strength of 13% of the vote, while the Reform Party with 19% of the vote got 51 seats. Again, if ballots were issued to some voters but not others, or in packs of 2 or 9 or 29, depending on which party you voted for and what riding you lived in, there'd be riots in the streets. Nor are the inequities of first past the post randomly distributed. Because only the candidate with the most votes in each riding is elected, first past the post rewards parties that can bunch their votes geographically. So parties that take an aggressively regional approach like the Bloc typically benefit at the expense of parties with a broader national outlook. For the same reason, parties will typically be shut out of whole regions of the country, though they may represent a quarter or more of the voters, the Liberals in the West, the Tories in Quebec, and so on. In some provincial elections, the same phenomenon results in one party winning all the seats in the House, or nearly so. What kind of democracy is one party and no opposition? How else might we define democracy? Well, it's a system in which you can vote for the party of your choice. Except you can't, as often as not in our system, not if you don't want to split the vote. How often have you been told that you can't vote for the party you prefer, but must vote for a party you don't like to prevent a party you detest from getting in? Indeed, most of the votes cast in any given election might as well not have been. You all know that if you live in one of the many safe ridings across the country where the result is a foregone conclusion. Why even bother? But in any riding you'll hear, don't waste your vote, quote unquote, on a party that can't win, because first past the post is a winner-take-all system. In sum, the present system allows the minority to rule over the majority. It gives some voters many times the voting power of others. It denies many voters the right to vote for the party of their choice and wastes the vote of many others. Oh, and it nearly killed the country a couple of times besides. Other than that, it's a pretty good system.